The envelope landed on her desk at 7:43 in the morning. No name, no return address, just a single photograph inside. And when Serena Vale pulled it out, her coffee cup slipped from her fingers and shattered on the marble floor. It was a photo of her mother, sitting at a cafe table, smiling, unaware. Written across the back in red ink, "She's next, unless you walk away tonight." Someone inside the Moretti mansion had sent this. Someone who knew exactly where her mother lived, where she ate breakfast, and what it would take to make Serena Vale run. They were right, but they had made one terrible miscalculation. They forgot that Serena Vale had spent 7 years standing beside the most dangerous man in the city, and she had learned from the best. If this story already has your heart racing, you're in the right place. Hit that subscribe button right now so you never miss a story like this one. Drop your city or country in the comments below. I want to see how far this story has traveled. And if you're watching until the very end, leave a like. It means more than you know. The photograph was still on her desk when Marco walked in. Marco Ricci, Lucian Moretti's head of security, was not a man who knocked. He never had been. He pushed doors open the way he pushed through every problem, with his shoulder first and his brain somewhere behind him. He stopped when he saw the broken coffee cup. Then he saw her face. "You look like you've seen a ghost," he said. Serena slid the photograph into the top drawer of her desk before he could get a better look. Her hands weren't shaking, she made sure of that. 7 years in this house had taught her that showing fear was the same as bleeding in open water. "I dropped my coffee," she said. "Go get someone from the kitchen to clean it up." Marco didn't move. He was watching her the way he watched people when he suspected something, with that flat, patient stillness that reminded her of a man waiting for a trapped animal to stop fighting. "Boss wants you in the study," he said. "Now." "Tell him I'll be there in 5 minutes." He said now. Serena looked up at him slowly. She had spent 7 years building the kind of quiet authority that didn't require volume. Marco held her gaze for exactly 3 seconds, which, in this house, counted as backing down. And then he left. She exhaled. She opened the drawer again and looked at the photograph. Her mother was wearing the blue cardigan, the one Serena had given her for her birthday 3 years ago. Whoever took this photo had been close enough to read the buttons on her collar. She picked up her phone and called her mother's number. 4 rings, 5. "Hello?" "Mom." Serena kept her voice exactly level. "Are you home today?" "I was just about to go to the market. Why? Is everything all right?" "Stay home today. I'll explain later. Lock the door and don't open it for anyone you don't know." A pause. "Serena, you're scaring me." "I know, I'm sorry. Just do it, please." She hung up before her mother could ask anything else. Then she put the photograph in her bag, smoothed her jacket, and walked toward the study. Lucian Moretti was standing at the window when she came in. He always stood at that window when something was wrong. It was a habit she'd noticed in the first year. He turned his back to rooms when he was thinking, putting the city between himself and whatever he didn't want to look at directly. The study was exactly the same as it had been for 7 years. Dark wood, heavy shelves, the desk that cost more than most people's cars, covered in papers that Serena organized every morning and that Lucian scattered within an hour. He didn't turn around when she entered. "Close the door," he said. She did. "Sit down." "I prefer to stand." He turned then, and she saw it immediately. Not anger, which she knew how to read. Something else. Something tighter. His jaw was set in the particular way it got when he was working very hard at controlling himself. "Where were you Thursday evening?" he asked. Serena didn't answer right away. Not because she was calculating a lie. She had learned long ago that lying to Lucian Moretti was like lying to a man who had already seen the recording, but because she needed to understand what he already knew before she decided what the truth was going to cost her. "I had a personal appointment," she said. A personal appointment. He repeated it the way people repeated things when they found them insulting. "With Detective Adrian Cross." The room got very quiet. She kept her expression neutral. "Yes." "You met with a law enforcement officer who has been investigating my organization for 18 months. He walked away from the window now, slowly, the way he moved when he was deciding something. "My personal secretary sat across a table from a detective and told me it was a personal appointment. I didn't tell you anything," she said. You didn't ask. Something crossed his face. I'm asking now. And I'm telling you, I didn't give him anything. Not a name, not a number, not a single piece of information about you or this organization. Then why were you there? Because he approached me first. She met his eyes. He came to me 6 weeks ago. He told me he knew I was your secretary. He said he had evidence that I was laundering financial documents through the company accounts, which is a lie, but a very detailed one. He offered me immunity in exchange for cooperation. Lucian went very still. I didn't cooperate, she continued. I met with him a second time to understand exactly what he had and who gave it to him. Because someone inside this organization is feeding him information, and I wanted to know who. A long silence. Why didn't you come to me? He asked. And that question was where the real conversation began. Because I didn't know if I could trust you, she said. She hadn't planned to say it that directly, but she had spent 7 years in this house watching men dance around the truth with Lucian Moretti, and she had watched what happened to them. Not the violence, that was rare. It was the quiet, permanent exclusion. The way they were simply no longer included in anything that mattered. She had decided, somewhere on the walk down from her office to this room, that she would rather be excluded for honesty than trusted for silence. Lucian looked at her for a long moment. You've been my secretary for 7 years. Yes. You've handled my accounts, my correspondence, my security schedules. I know what I've handled, Lucian. And you're telling me you didn't know if you could trust me. I'm telling you that I discovered someone in your organization is building a case against you using falsified records that look like they came from my department, and I didn't know whether you would believe me or whether you would assume I was the source. She paused. Given what you're asking me right now, I think I made a reasonable calculation. He turned away again. This time he went to the desk, pressed both hands flat on the surface, and stared down at the papers without seeing them. Who did Cross say gave him the documents? He said. He didn't, but he used a phrase. He said his source was someone who had been waiting for the right moment for a long time. She watched him carefully. He said it was someone close to you, someone you'd never suspect. That's what they always say. I know, but he showed me one of the documents, Lucian, just one page, and whoever created it, they know your organization well enough to fake my signature convincingly. They know the format of our internal memos, the header codes, the authorization language. She waited. That's not an outsider. He looked up. That's someone sitting at a desk inside this building, she said. Marco came back 20 minutes later. Lucian had dismissed Serena with the kind of flat, clipped efficiency he used when he needed time to think. Stay in the building, don't make any calls. And she had gone back to her office and sat at her desk and stared at the drawer where the photograph was. She was still staring at it when Marco appeared in her doorway again. He wants the personnel files, Marco said. The ones from the last 3 years. Which department? All of them. Serena looked at him. That's 900 files. That's what he said. She pulled up the database and started the export. While the files compiled, she watched Marco lean against her doorframe with his arms crossed, looking at the room with the particular blankness of a man who had been told to watch someone without looking like he was watching them. Marco, she said without looking up from the screen. What? How long have you been with him? A pause. 12 years. And in 12 years, has anyone ever tried to set you up? Another pause. Longer. Once. What happened? Nothing good, Marco said. For them. She nodded slowly. If someone was feeding information to Cross, someone who knew our internal documentation well enough to fake authorization signatures, who would you look at first? He was quiet for a moment. She could feel him deciding whether to answer. I'd look at whoever benefits from the boss going down, he said finally. Not whoever has access. Everybody's got access to something. The question is who needs him gone bad enough to take the risk. The file export finished. She pulled the drive, labeled it, and held it out to him. He took it. But he didn't leave. You should know something, he said. She waited. He had you followed. After the photo came in this morning, the one of your mother. He said it carefully, watching her reaction. He wanted to know if you were going to run. The floor seemed to tilt slightly beneath her. He knew about the photograph, she said. He intercepted it before it reached your desk. Marco met her eyes. That photograph never came from outside. It came from inside this house. He found out about it at 6 this morning. He let it reach you because he wanted to see what you would do. Serena sat very still. He was testing me, she said. He tests everyone. He tested me. Marco had the grace to look slightly uncomfortable. He trusts people by verifying them. You know how he is. I know exactly how he is, she said, and her voice was very quiet. I've been beside that man for 7 years, and he tested me with a photograph of my mother. Marco left. Serena sat at her desk for a long time after that. She didn't go back to the study. She went instead to her office closet, where she kept a spare jacket and a change of shoes for the days that ran long. She took out the flat-bottom bag she'd stored there since her first month in this job, an old habit from a paranoid woman who had learned that working for powerful people meant always having an exit ready. She started packing it. Not dramatically, not with shaking hands or tears or any of the things that would have made the moment feel significant from the outside. Just methodically, quietly, the way she had always done the hard things in her life. Her laptop charger, the personal notebook she used for meeting notes, the small framed photograph of her and her mother from 3 years ago, taken at the cafe where her mother wore the blue cardigan. She looked at that photograph for a moment. Then she put it in the bag. She took the envelope from the drawer, the one with the photograph of her mother, and tucked it inside too. She shut down her computer. She walked to the door of her office, pulled it open, and stood in the corridor for a moment, listening to the sounds of the house. Somewhere below, the kitchen staff was preparing the evening meal. Somewhere above, 2 men were having a conversation she could hear but not understand. The house had its own rhythms, its own language, and she had learned all of it over 7 years until it felt as natural as her own heartbeat. She had loved this work. Not the danger, not the moral complexity she had spent years carefully not examining, but the work itself. The sheer precision of keeping Lucian Moretti's empire running like something clean and functional despite everything it actually was. She had been good at it. She turned and walked toward the staircase. She was 3 steps from the front door when she heard his voice. Serena. She didn't stop, not immediately. She took 1 more step, and then 2, because stopping felt like surrender and she was not ready to surrender. But she stopped. She heard him come down the stairs. Not rushing. He never rushed. He moved with the particular deliberateness of a man who had learned that moving too fast made you look afraid. She turned around. He was at the bottom of the staircase, still in his jacket from the morning meeting. He looked at her bag, registered what it meant, and something shifted in his face that she couldn't quite name. It wasn't anger. It wasn't calculation. It looked, if she were being honest, like a man who had just realized he'd broken something that could not be put back the way it was. "Where are you going?" he asked. "I resigned," she said. 20 minutes ago. I sent the letter to HR. "You can't resign." "I already did." "Serena, you tested me with a photograph of my mother," she said. "You had someone put a threat against my family on my desk to see what I would do. And I understand why you do it. I understand the logic, but I am not one of your employees that you don't know. I am the woman who has been beside you for 7 years, and you tested me with a photograph of my mother." The silence lasted a long time. "I know," he said. "That's not enough." "I know that too." She turned back toward the door. "Tell me the truth before you leave." She stopped again. This time she didn't move for a long moment. His voice had done something she had never heard it do before. It had broken. Not completely, not visibly, but she had spent 7 years listening to Lucian Moretti talk, and she heard it. The fracture, like a hairline crack in stone. She turned around again. He was standing exactly where he'd been, but he looked different, like a man who had spent years holding a wall in place with his own hands and had just let go of it. "What truth do you want?" she asked. "The meeting with Cross," he said. All of it. Not the version you decided was safe to tell me. Everything. She looked at him for a long moment. You first, she said. He blinked. For the first time in 7 years, Lucian Moretti looked genuinely caught off guard. Tell me, she said, why you really let that photograph reach my desk. And don't give me security protocol. Give me the truth. The question hung in the air between them. And the most feared man in the city stood at the bottom of his own staircase, in his own house, in the city he controlled, and said nothing. Because the truth was something he hadn't let himself say out loud yet. And she could see him deciding right now whether he was brave enough to say it. The silence between them was not comfortable. It was the kind of silence that had weight, the kind that pressed down on a room and made the air feel thinner. Serena stood with her bag on her shoulder and watched Lucian Moretti try to find a way to say something he had apparently never practiced saying. She had seen him negotiate with men who wanted him dead. She had watched him sit across tables from lawyers, politicians, and rivals who were all trying to take something from him, and he had never flinched, not once, not visibly. But right now, standing at the bottom of his own staircase, asked a simple question by a woman with a bag over her shoulder, he looked like a man trying to remember how to breathe. I let the photograph reach you, he said slowly, because I needed to know if you would come to me. Serena waited. Someone in this house is feeding information to Cross. I've known for 3 weeks. I've been narrowing it down and I've been watching everyone, including you. Not because I believed you were the source, but because I needed... He stopped, started again. I needed to know that when it mattered, you would choose to stay. You needed to know I was loyal, she said flatly. I needed to know you were safe, he said. And that was different. That landed differently. There's a version of this where whoever is working against me decides you're more useful as leverage than as a loose end. I needed to know you'd come to me before they got to you. So you manufactured a threat against my mother, she said, to test my reaction. The photograph was already in play. It didn't come from me. It came from whoever is working with Cross. My people intercepted it before it reached your desk, but I made the decision to let it through, because I wanted to see if you would run or if you would come to me. He met her eyes directly. You did neither. You called your mother, you hid the photograph, and you walked into my study like nothing happened. Because I didn't trust you enough to show you I was scared, she said. Something moved across his face. I know. That's the problem, Lucian. Do you understand that? 7 years. And my first instinct when I'm threatened is to hide it from you. She shifted the bag on her shoulder. That's not a loyalty problem. That's a relationship problem. He looked at her for a long moment. What kind of relationship are we talking about? The only one we've ever had, she said. Boss and employee. And I'm telling you that after 7 years, I'm tired of being the employee. She turned toward the door again. Cross told you something else, Lucian said. Something you didn't tell me in the study. She stopped. Her hand was almost on the door handle. I know because I know you, he continued. You gave me the structure, the frame, but you left something out. You always leave something out when you're deciding whether the information is going to hurt someone. She stood there for a moment with her back to him. Then she turned around, walked back to the base of the staircase, and sat down on the bottom step. Not elegantly. She dropped onto it the way tired people sit, heavily, without ceremony. She put her bag on the floor beside her. Lucian looked at her, mildly surprised. Then he sat down beside her on the step. They sat like that for a moment. 2 people on the stairs of a mansion worth millions, sitting like kids who'd run out of places to go. Cross told me the name of his source, she said. Lucian went very still. He didn't plan to. It slipped out. Or he wanted it to slip out, I'm not sure which. He said it like he was thinking out loud. She looked at the floor. He said, Dante has been waiting for this moment for years. The silence that followed was a different kind. Not heavy. Hollow. Lucian said nothing for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was very quiet. Dante Ricci. Marco's younger brother, she said. I know who Dante is. I know you do. Another long silence. She could feel him processing it. Not just the name, but the implications. Dante Ricci had been with the Moretti organization for 4 years. He worked in the financial division. He had access to the internal documentation system. He knew the header codes, the authorization formats, the signature styles. He had everything he needed to build a case that looked like it came from Serena's department. "Did you tell Marco?" Lucian asked. "No." "Good." "I didn't tell you either," she said. "For 3 weeks I sat on that information because I didn't know what you would do with it." He looked at her. "What did you think I would do?" "I thought you might hurt him," she said simply, "or that you'd tell Marco, and Marco would hurt him, and then Marco would have to live with that. And Dante he's 26 years old. He's an idiot, but he's 26. She paused. "I didn't want that on my conscience." Lucian was quiet. "So I was trying to figure out if there was another way," she said, "a way that didn't end with someone getting hurt. And while I was figuring that out, I was also realizing that I was carrying this alone because I didn't feel like I could bring it to you." She looked at him directly. "That's when I knew I needed to leave." "Because you were protecting me," he said. "Because I was protecting everyone," she said, "including you, from yourself." She picked up her bag again. "And that is not my job." She stood up. "Serena." She looked down at him, which was strange because she almost never looked down at him. He was still sitting on the step, and from that angle, without the desk between them, without the formal geometry of boss and employee, he looked tired, genuinely tired, not the performative exhaustion of a man who wanted sympathy, the real kind, the kind that had been accumulating for a long time. "What do you want me to say?" he asked. "I don't want you to say anything," she said. "I want you to actually think about what I just told you, not what it means for the organization, not what you're going to do about Dante. What it means that the woman who has worked beside you for 7 years didn't trust you enough to come to you with something this important." She walked to the door. This time she actually got her hand on the handle. "I trust you," he said. His voice came from behind her, low and without the usual authority in it. "I don't know how to show it. I know the difference. But I trust you more than I've trusted anyone in a very long time, and I didn't know that was a problem." She stood with her hand on the door handle. "It's a problem," she said quietly, "because trust isn't something you just have. It's something you show, every day, in every small decision." She didn't turn around. "You showed me surveillance photos. You let a threat reach my desk. You had Marco watch me this morning. That's not trust, Lucian. That's control with a different name." She opened the door. The evening air came in, cool, faintly smelling of rain that had fallen earlier in the afternoon. The driveway was lit by the low landscape lights. One of the security guards at the gate was visible in the distance, just a shape in the dark. She stepped through the doorway, and then Marco's voice came from somewhere to her left, sharp and wrong. "Boss!" She turned. Marco was coming from the side corridor at a half run, which was something she had never seen him do. Marco Ricci did not run. He was a man who moved at one speed, always, because he had learned somewhere along the way that urgency invited panic and panic invited mistakes. But he was running now. Lucian was already on his feet. "Dante's gone," Marco said. He was slightly out of breath, which was also something Serena had never seen. "His apartment is empty. His car is gone. He cleared out his desk in the finance office sometime in the last 2 hours." He looked at Lucian with an expression that was hard to read. Fury and something else. Something worse than fury. "He knew we were looking." Lucian turned to look at Serena. She had 1 foot inside the door and 1 foot on the step, and she was looking at Marco with the particular careful stillness of a person trying to decide very quickly whether they were leaving or staying. "Someone warned him," Lucian said. He wasn't accusing her. He was stating it, working it out. "Someone who found out we were—" He stopped. "The personnel files. I asked Marco to pull them 2 hours ago." "I ran the export," Serena said slowly. "The system logs it," Lucian said. "When someone pulls 900 personnel files at once, it triggers an internal alert. Anyone with access to the security dashboard would have seen it." He looked at Marco. "Who else has access to the security dashboard?" Marco's expression did something complicated. "Dante does," he said. "I put him on the access list 8 months ago because he needed to cross-reference financial records with security clearance levels. The silence that followed was the worst kind. The kind where everyone in the room understood exactly what had happened, and nobody wanted to say it out loud. Serena was the one who said it. He saw the alert, she said. He knew you were looking for something, and he ran. Marco looked at her, then at Lucian, then back at her. His face had gone through several different expressions and landed on something raw and unguarded that she'd never seen on him before. My brother, he said, like he was trying the words out and finding they didn't fit. Marco, Lucian started. Don't. Marco's voice was flat, not angry, just flat. Don't do that. Don't be careful with me about this. He ran a hand over his face. How long have you known? Lucian looked at Serena. Marco followed his gaze. And Serena watched the understanding move across his face, slow, then all at once, the way water breaks through a cracked dam. You knew, Marco said to her. For 3 weeks, she said. I'm sorry. He stared at her. You knew for 3 weeks, and you didn't. I didn't know what to do with it, she said. I didn't know who to trust with it. Marco made a sound, not a word, something shorter and harder than a word, and turned away from her. He walked to the wall and put his hand on it and stood there with his back to the room. His shoulders were rigid. His breathing was audible. Lucian watched him. He looked like a man who wanted to say something useful and knew there was nothing useful to say. Serena took her foot off the step and came back inside. She set her bag down just inside the door and didn't acknowledge that she was doing it. He didn't run without somewhere to go, she said. She kept her voice quiet and even because Marco was holding himself together with what looked like significant effort, and she didn't want to be the thing that broke that. Cross gave him a safety plan. That means Cross has somewhere Dante can go that's protected. If Cross is keeping him safe, it means he intends to use him, Lucian said. Yes, which means Dante is only valuable to Cross while he's willing to testify. And Dante is only willing to testify if he believes we can't reach him. She looked at Lucian. But Dante made a mistake. What mistake? He ran before he could plant the last piece of evidence. The falsified documents that were supposed to look like they came from my department. Cross showed me 1 page. But to actually build a case, he'd need a complete set. Signatures across multiple transactions, account authorizations over a period of months. She paused. Dante ran before he finished, which means Cross doesn't have enough to make the case yet. Lucian was looking at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. You figured that out, he said. Yes. While you were sitting on this information for 3 weeks. I wasn't just sitting on it, she said. I was working out what he had, what he still needed, and what the gap was. She met his eyes. I was building you a defense, on my own, without telling you, because I didn't trust you to handle it without doing something that couldn't be undone. Marco turned around from the wall. His eyes were red but dry. He looked at Serena with an expression that she couldn't quite categorize, somewhere between gratitude and the specific anguish of a man who owed an apology to someone he'd been watching with suspicion all morning. The documents Cross needs, Marco said, his voice rougher than usual. They'd have to be uploaded to the case management system through an authenticated login. Yes, Serena said, Dante's login is still active. Which means if someone logs in as Dante tonight, we'd know exactly where he is, Lucian finished. The 3 of them stood in the entrance hall of the Moretti mansion, and for a moment it felt like something had shifted. Not resolved, nothing so neat as that, but shifted. The geometry of the room had changed somehow. Serena had come back inside, and no one had acknowledged it, and that itself was a kind of statement. I need to make some calls, Lucian said. He looked at Marco. Get Chen in here and pull everything we have on Cross's known associates and safe houses. He paused. Don't do anything about Dante. Marco's jaw tightened. Lucian, I mean it. Not tonight. We find him. We bring him in. We talk to him. He held Marco's gaze. He's your brother. That means something. Even now. Marco looked like he wanted to argue. He looked like he wanted to argue badly, but he nodded once and left. Lucian turned to Serena. She was standing with her bag at her feet, her arms crossed, looking at him with the particular careful expression of a woman who had made a decision and hadn't yet decided if it was the right one. You came back inside, he said. There's a problem that needs solving, she said. I'm good at solving problems. That's not why you came back. She looked at him for a long moment. Don't push it, she said. I'm inside the door. That's all you get right now. He almost smiled. It wasn't complete, but it was the closest thing she had seen from him all day, and it lasted about 2 seconds before he remembered himself and let it go. The files you've been building, he said. On Cross. On Dante. On the gap in the evidence. Can you get me everything tonight? Yes. And the original photograph. The one of your mother. She looked at him. I want to know who took it, he said. Not Dante. He was in the finance office that morning. Someone else was at that cafe. His voice was quiet, but with something underneath it that she recognized. Not the cold, performative menace he used in meetings with rivals. Something older and more personal. Someone followed your mother. I want to know who. She picked up her bag. Not to leave. To carry it back upstairs, back to her office, back to the desk where she had spent 7 years building something she hadn't fully understood until today. I'll have everything ready in 2 hours, she said. She walked past him toward the staircase. Serena. She stopped on the second step and looked back. From there, they were almost at eye level, which didn't happen often and always made conversation feel more honest. What you said before, he said carefully, about trust being something you show. Every day. He paused like a man measuring his words for the first time. You're right. And I know I don't... Another pause. He seemed genuinely frustrated with himself. I'm not good at this part. I know, she said. But I want to be better at it. She studied him for a moment. 7 years of reading this man. His silences, his deflections, his particular tells for when he was being honest versus when he was being strategic. Right now he was being honest. She was fairly sure. 75% sure, which in this house was about as certain as anything got. Start with Dante, she said. Handle it the way you told Marco you would. Bring him in, talk to him. Don't let this become another thing that gets buried. She held his gaze. And tomorrow, when this is over, we're going to have a conversation, a real one, about what the last 7 years have actually been. He nodded, slowly. All right. All right, she echoed. She turned and walked upstairs, and neither of them said anything else, and the house settled back into its sounds. Kitchen, distant voices, the small mechanical hum of security systems running their constant quiet watch over everything. Behind her, she heard Lucian pick up his phone and start making calls. She didn't look back. But for the first time in 3 weeks, something in her chest loosened slightly. Not relief, not exactly. More like the particular sensation of a knot that had been pulled too tight finally being given enough slack to breathe. It wasn't fixed. None of this was fixed. Dante was in the wind. Cross was building a case. Someone had followed her mother to a cafe and photographed her in the blue cardigan, and that person was still out there, still watching, still calculating. And Lucian Moretti was still a man with more walls than windows, still learning, very slowly and with significant resistance, that the people closest to him were not pieces on a board. But he was learning. She had seen it tonight, not in anything grand, in the way he sat down beside her on the step, in the way he said, I trust you, and sounded like he meant it, and was ashamed he hadn't shown it better. Small things. But in this house, with this man, small things were the only things that had ever changed anything. She reached her office, set her bag down next to her desk, and opened her laptop. The screen lit up, casting pale light across the room. She had work to do. The first hour was quiet work. Serena pulled every file she had built over 3 weeks. The folder she had named with deliberate blandness Q3 Vendor Reconciliation, so that anyone glancing at her screen would see nothing worth investigating. Inside it was everything. The timeline of her meetings with Cross, the single document page he had shown her, photographed on her phone through the cafe window when he looked away. Her own reconstruction of what a complete falsified file set would need to look like, built from her knowledge of the internal documentation system. And her notes, careful, methodical, written in the shorthand she had developed over years of taking meeting notes that needed to be useful and unreadable to anyone else. She organized it into something Lucian could actually use, something that told a story with evidence instead of just assertion. She was halfway through compiling the second section when Chen arrived. Victor Chen was Lucian's lawyer, which was a description that captured maybe 30% of what Victor Chen actually did. He was a small, precise man in his mid-50s who wore the same style of suit in slightly different shades of gray and who had the particular quality of seeming like he was listening to you and simultaneously thinking about something else entirely. Serena had dealt with him for years. She respected him the way she respected very sharp things, carefully and with full attention. He knocked on her office door, which meant Lucian had told him to, because Victor Chen didn't knock either. He said, "You have documentation," Chen said. "Give me 40 minutes. He wants it now." "He wants it accurate more than he wants it now," she said without looking up. 40 minutes. Chen came in and sat in the chair across from her desk and waited. He didn't speak. He didn't check his phone. He just sat with his hands folded and his eyes on the middle distance, which was either very calm or very unsettling depending on the day. Tonight it was unsettling. "Victor," she said after a moment. How bad is the exposure if Cross takes what he has to a federal prosecutor?" A pause. "Depends entirely on what he has. Assume he has 6 months of falsified transaction records, authorization signatures that look like mine, and a witness who worked inside the financial division." Another pause. Longer. "That's a significant problem." "How significant?" "The kind that doesn't get solved in a courtroom," he said carefully. "The kind that gets solved before it reaches a courtroom." She stopped typing. "I need you to be clearer than that." He looked at her directly for the first time since he'd sat down. "What I mean," he said, "is that if Cross has built what you're describing, the only way to neutralize it legally is to discredit the witness before he can testify, which requires finding him, which requires—" He paused. "How did you describe the gap in the evidence?" "Dante ran before he could finish uploading the document set," she said. "Cross needs authenticated files with signatures across multiple transactions. He only has a partial set. Then the case isn't viable yet." "Not yet. But if Dante logs into the system from wherever Cross is keeping him, then it becomes viable very quickly." Chen unfolded his hands and refolded them the other direction. "We need to find him before that happens." "We're working on it." "There's something else," Chen said. He said it in a different tone, slightly flatter, slightly more careful. The tone of a man delivering information he would prefer not to deliver. "I got a call this afternoon, before Lucian called me here, from a colleague in the Federal Circuit." Serena looked at him. "There's a sealed filing," Chen said. "My contact couldn't give me details, but the filing references an ongoing investigation into organized financial crimes, and it was submitted 4 days ago." He held her gaze. 4 days ago, whoever is working with Cross believed the document set was complete. The room went very quiet. "That's not possible," she said. "Dante only had partial, unless Dante wasn't the only one building the file set." She sat with that for a moment. The implications moved through her in sequence, each one landing harder than the last. "There's a second source," she said. "That's what I think," Chen said. She stood up. "I need to talk to Lucian. That's why he sent me up here." She grabbed the folder she'd compiled, incomplete, 40 minutes early, not as clean as she wanted, and walked out of her office with Chen behind her. The study was different when she walked in. The lights were lower. Marco was there, standing against the far wall with his arms crossed, and the expression of a man who had been receiving bad news in installments for the past hour. 2 other men she recognized from Lucian's security team were at the table with laptops open. Lucian was on the phone, his back to the room, at the window again. He turned when she walked in and ended the call without a goodbye. "Chen told you," he said. "There's a second source," she said. "Someone else has been building the file set." "Yes." "For how long?" "We think at least 4 months." He looked at her steadily. The filing Chen's contact referenced was submitted 4 days ago, which means whoever the second source is, they believed the documentation was complete 4 days ago. "But it wasn't," she said. "I know what the complete set would need to look like. It would need transaction authorizations going back to January. I've checked every authorization that went through my access codes for the past 8 months. There are no irregularities. Whatever files Cross has, they're not complete." "Unless," Marco said from the wall, his voice rough. "They're not using your authorization codes." Everyone in the room turned to look at him. Dante had access to the financial system, Marco said. He was looking at the floor, which meant he was thinking carefully. But he didn't have authorization-level access. He couldn't sign off on transactions. He could only process them. He looked up. To generate authorizations, you'd need someone with signatory access. Serena felt something cold move through her. Who has signatory access? In the financial division, Marco said. 3 people. Dante, because I put him on the list, which was a level above what he needed, I know, don't... He cut himself off. You. And Elena Vasquez. Elena Vasquez had been the Moretti organization's chief financial officer for 6 years. She was 61 years old, meticulous, quiet, and had a reputation for being entirely uninterested in anything that wasn't a spreadsheet. She had outlasted 3 security directors, 2 lawyers, and 1 attempted hostile takeover of the legitimate business holdings. Serena had always liked her. "No," Serena said, simply and immediately. "We can't rule her out," Marco said. "Elena has been here 6 years. Dante has been here 4 years," Marco said, "and I knew him his whole life." That shut her down. She looked at Lucian. "Have you pulled her access logs?" "We're doing it now," he said. He nodded toward one of the men at the table with the laptops. The room waited. It had the specific compressed tension of people waiting for a result they already half knew was going to be bad. Serena stood with the incomplete folder in her hands and felt the edges of her carefully built plan starting to blur. She had spent 3 weeks building a defense based on the assumption that the evidence was incomplete, that Cross had a partial set of documents that couldn't sustain a prosecution, that there was a window, a gap between what they had and what they needed, in which she and Lucian could act. If Elena Vasquez had been building a parallel file set with authentic signatory authorizations, there was no gap. The case was already complete. It had been complete for 4 days, and the sealed filing meant a federal prosecutor had already looked at it and believed it was viable. They weren't ahead of this. They had been behind it for months. One of the men at the laptop said, "I've got her access logs." Everyone moved toward the table. Serena pushed in between Marco and Chen and looked at the screen. The log showed Elena Vasquez's authorization activity for the past 8 months. It was dense. She was an active user of the system, which was normal for a CFO. And at first glance, it looked unremarkable. Regular authorizations, standard transaction approvals. The normal rhythm of a busy financial officer. And then Serena saw it. It wasn't the number of authorizations. It was the timing. "Every 3rd Tuesday," she said quietly. The man at the laptop looked up at her. "Look at the timestamp pattern," she said. She leaned in and pointed at the screen without touching it. Standard authorizations run throughout the week. Morning, afternoon, random distribution. But these ones, here and here and here, they're all between 11 p.m. and midnight, every 3rd Tuesday. For 6 months. Marco leaned in beside her. That's not a normal work pattern. Nobody authorizes transactions at 11 p.m. unless they're doing it when they think no one is checking. She straightened up. She was duplicating real transactions with modified parameters, legitimate authorizations by day, a parallel set, same transaction numbers, different account routing. At night, the room was very quiet. "It's elegant," Chen said. He didn't sound admiring. He sounded like a man recognizing craftsmanship in something that was about to destroy his client. If Cross's team was sophisticated enough to layer the 2 sets, the real authorizations and the duplicates, into a single document package, it would look like Moretti's organization was running dual transaction streams. Money in through legitimate channels, out through... "It looks like financial fraud," Lucian said. His voice was very flat. "Large scale, sustained, documented." "And it looks like it came from my department," Serena said, "because the authorization signatures are mine. Elena has had access to my digital signature credentials since I gave her system administrator privileges 2 years ago." She stopped. "I gave them to her because I trusted her, because she needed them to manage the system during the audit." Nobody said anything. "I gave her the keys," Serena said. Her voice was steady, but something behind it wasn't. I handed them to her and said, please, take care of this while I'm managing the external review. And she said, of course, and she used them to build a case against Lucian that looks like it came from me. She set the folder down on the table, very carefully, because her hands were doing something she didn't want them to do, and she needed a moment. Where is she now? Lucian asked. His voice had changed. The flatness was gone. There was something underneath it, quiet and very cold, that she had heard before, on very bad nights in the early years of this job. Her access logs show she was in the system as recently as, the man at the laptop checked, 6:47 this evening. 2 hours ago, Marco said. Is she in the building? Lucian asked. Her keycard shows she left at 7:15, the man said. Lucian looked at Marco. I'll find her, Marco said. Don't touch her, Lucian said. Find her and watch her. I want to know where she goes and who she talks to. Nothing else. Not yet. Marco left. Serena picked up the folder again. She didn't know why. She had nothing useful in it anymore. It was a defense built against a problem that was smaller than the actual problem. She held it anyway because it gave her hands something to do. The sealed filing, she said to Chen. If a federal prosecutor has reviewed it and found it viable, what's the timeline? A sealed filing at this stage typically precedes a motion to unseal, Chen said, which typically precedes an arrest warrant. He adjusted his glasses. Days, possibly less. So we have days, she said. Possibly less, Chen repeated. Lucian was looking at her. She became aware of it and looked back at him. You're thinking about something, he said. I'm thinking about why, she said. Not the mechanics, the reason. She set the folder down again. Elena has been here 6 years. She's been loyal, effective, and visible. Why now? Why this? People have reasons, Chen said. I know people have reasons. I want her reason. She looked at Lucian. Because if she's been here 6 years and decided to do this, she either got a better offer from someone or something happened that changed her calculation. And if something happened, then we need to know what, Lucian said. And we need to know when, she said. Because if she made this decision 6 months ago, then someone approached her 6 months ago. And that means whoever is orchestrating this has been planning it since before Dante got involved. Dante might not be the primary source at all. He might have been recruited later, as a distraction. The room went very still. Serena felt it landing, the full weight of it, as she heard herself say it out loud for the first time. Someone recruited Elena first, she said slowly. Dante second, probably 3 or 4 months in. Elena provided the authorization signatures. Dante provided the internal document formatting and the cover story one. The appearance of a paper trail from the financial division. Cross got 2 sources that corroborated each other. She looked at Lucian. It wasn't a leak. It was a construction project. Lucian sat down, which she had almost never seen him do in a situation like this. He sat down heavily in the chair at the end of the table and put his hand over his mouth and stared at the table surface. Someone built this from the outside in, he said. Yes. Which means Cross isn't the originator. He's the delivery mechanism. Yes. Someone hired him, Lucian said, or gave him enough to make it worth his while. Someone who wanted me gone badly enough to spend 6 months building a federal case from scratch. He looked up. That's not a rival. That's not a competitor. That's personal. Serena said nothing because he was right and there was nothing useful to add. The people who hate me that much, he said, more to himself than to the room. I've been systematically neutralizing for 3 years. I thought... He stopped. I thought I was ahead of it. Someone let you think that, Serena said. His jaw tightened. Think about who benefited from you believing your most dangerous enemies were already handled, she said. Someone gave you that confidence. Someone made sure you were looking at the wrong thing long enough for this to be built right under your nose. The man at the laptop said quietly, Mr. Moretti. Something in his voice made everyone in the room turn. I've got something else in the access logs. He looked deeply uncomfortable. There's a secondary user flagged on Elena Vasquez's access for the past 3 months. Someone using her credentials from a remote login. From where? Lucian asked. The man looked at the screen, looked at Lucian, looked back at the screen as if hoping the answer might change. From inside this building, he said. From the IP address registered to... He stopped. Say it, Lucian said. From the IP address registered to your private office upstairs, the man said. Someone has been logging into Elena Vasquez's credentials from your personal network. The room didn't make a sound. Serena looked at Lucian. His face had gone through something, a flash of something raw and uncontrolled, and then it closed down again, tight and flat, the way a wound closes over too fast and traps the damage inside. Someone had been inside his private office, using his own network, to build a case against him. For months. While he sat at that desk, while he made his calls and signed his papers and believed he was in control of his own house, someone had been inside the most private space he owned, using it as a weapon. Who has access to your private office? Chen asked. Lucian didn't answer for a moment. The cleaning staff, Marco said from the doorway. He had come back in without anyone noticing. Security team, on rotation. Elena for the financial audits. He paused. And... He stopped. And who? Chen asked. Marco looked at Lucian. The look passed between them like something was being confirmed rather than revealed. And Carla, Lucian said, very quietly. Serena went cold. Carla Moretti, Lucian's younger sister, who had left the family business 8 years ago after a very loud and very final argument with Lucian that Serena had never been told the details of, who lived in another city and called on birthdays and never came to the house, who had been, Serena knew now, pulling a thread she had never pulled before, the one person Lucian never talked about. Not to her, not to Marco, not to anyone. She has access, Marco said. His voice was careful. You gave it to her 2 years ago, after she... He stopped, started differently. After the conversation you had. You said you wanted to leave the door open. Lucian stood up very slowly. Get me Carla's location. Lucien, Marco started. Now! The word came out quiet and final, and the room responded to it the way rooms responded to Lucian Moretti when there was no negotiating left. Serena stood in the center of it all, with the incomplete folder in her hands and the cold understanding spreading through her that the plan she had built, every careful piece of it, every assumption, every calculation, was built on the wrong foundation entirely. She had been trying to protect Lucian from an enemy outside his walls. The enemy had been standing at his own desk. Carla Moretti was not hard to find. That was the first thing that felt wrong. Marco had her location within 11 minutes. A hotel 14 blocks from the mansion, registered under a name that was almost but not quite a fake, the kind of thin cover that a person uses when they want to be found eventually, but not immediately. Room 714. Checked in 3 days ago. Paid cash for a week. 3 days ago was 1 day before the sealed filing was submitted to the Federal Circuit. Lucian stood in the study with his phone in his hand and looked at the address Marco had written on a piece of paper and said nothing for a long moment. Serena watched him. She had been watching him for 7 years, and she knew the difference between the silence of a man calculating and the silence of a man absorbing. This was the second kind. This was Lucian Moretti standing very still while something inside him rearranged itself around a new and terrible fact. She wanted you to find her, Serena said. I know. Which means she's ready for whatever comes next. She's not running, she's waiting. I know that too. Then you know going there tonight is exactly what she expects. He looked at her. What's your alternative? Let me go first, Serena said. The room, Chen at the table, the 2 security men with their laptops, Marco in the doorway, went very quiet. Absolutely not, Marco said. She doesn't know how much we've found out, Serena said, keeping her eyes on Lucian. She knows Dante ran. She probably knows we pulled personnel files, but she doesn't know we found the access logs. She doesn't know we traced the remote logins to this office. She paused. If Lucian walks through that hotel door, she knows the game is over and she goes straight to her backup plan. Whatever she's arranged with Cross. But if I walk in, she'll know something's wrong the moment she sees you, Lucian said. Maybe, but she'll also be curious. I've never been a threat to her. I'm the secretary. She said the word deliberately, with a particular edge. She'll want to know what I know and how much. She'll talk because she'll think she can manage me. She looked at him steadily. Give me 20 minutes with her. No, Lucian said. Lucian, I said no. He folded the paper with the address and put it in his jacket pocket. You're not walking into a room with someone who has spent 6 months building a federal case and has nothing left to lose. That's not a negotiation. That's a trap. Then what is your plan? She asked. Walk in there with Marco and 2 security men and confirm everything she suspects? My plan, he said, is to go there myself, alone. Now everyone in the room had something to say and said it simultaneously. Chen started with, "That's inadvisable." Marco said, "Absolutely not," again with more force behind it, and one of the security men at the table made a sound that wasn't quite a word. Lucian let them finish. He waited with the particular patience of a man who had already made his decision and was simply allowing the room to exhaust its objections. Then he said, "She's my sister. Whatever she's done, she's my sister. If I send anyone else, it becomes something that can't be walked back." He looked at Marco. "You know I'm right." Marco's jaw worked. He didn't answer. "I'll have a team on the perimeter," Lucian said. 2 men in the lobby, 2 on the floor. I go in, I talk to her, and I find out what she actually wants." He paused. "Because she wants something. People don't spend 6 months doing this unless they want something that conversation couldn't get them." Serena looked at him. "She tried conversation 8 years ago," she said quietly. "You told me once, not the details, but you told me it ended badly." Something crossed his face. "Yes." "What did she want then?" A long pause. "Out," he said. "She wanted out. She wanted me to let her take her share of the family holdings and walk away clean. No ties, no obligations, no looking over her shoulder for the rest of her life." He said it evenly, but she could hear the weight under it. "I said no. I told her the family didn't work that way." Serena absorbed that. "And 8 years later, she's still trying to get out," she said. "Except now she's doing it by burning the whole thing down. If she testifies with Cross's evidence, even if it doesn't result in a conviction, the investigation alone destroys the legitimate businesses," Chen said, "freezes the assets, forces a restructure that would effectively dissolve the organization." He looked at Lucian over his glasses. "She gets what she wanted. The family enterprise ceases to exist, and she walks away clean because she cooperated with federal investigators." "She gets her freedom," Serena said. 8 years late." The room was quiet for a moment. Then Serena picked up her bag and put it on her shoulder. "What are you doing?" Lucian asked. "Coming with you," she said. "I just told you." "You told me you're going alone," she said. "I'm telling you that you're going to walk into that room and sit across from your sister who has spent 8 years hating you for a decision you made, and you are going to try to have a conversation that requires more self-awareness than you have naturally demonstrated in the years I've known you." She met his eyes. "I'm not coming as backup. I'm coming because someone in that room needs to be able to hear what she's actually saying underneath what she's saying, and that is not your skill set." Lucian stared at her. Marco made a sound that might, in different circumstances, have been the beginning of a laugh. "Fine," Lucian said. The word came out like it cost him something. "But you don't speak first. And if I tell you to leave the room, you leave." "If you tell me to leave the room, I'll consider it," she said. She walked out the door without waiting for his response. The drive took 9 minutes. Lucian sat in the back of the car beside her and looked out the window the entire time and said nothing. She let him. She had learned in 7 years that the things Lucian Moretti didn't say in cars were usually the most important ones, and pushing him to say them out loud before he was ready only made him shut down entirely. His hands were on his knees. Still. She noticed because they were never completely still. He had a habit of pressing his thumb against his index finger when he was managing himself. A tiny, repetitive motion she had observed so many times it had become invisible. But right now his hands were flat and motionless, and that was worse somehow than the usual habit. The hotel was mid-range, not cheap enough to be conspicuous in its cheapness, not expensive enough to attract attention. The lobby had the particular anonymous quality of a place designed to be forgotten. 2 of Marco's men were already visible, one near the elevator bank, one at a chair near the entrance, both pretending to be occupied with their phones with the specific inadequacy of large men trying to look casual. Lucian looked at them as he walked through the lobby, didn't acknowledge them, pressed the elevator button. In the elevator, he finally spoke. "Whatever she says about me," he said, still facing forward, "don't adjust your assessment of the situation based on it." Serena looked at his profile. "I've been working for you for 7 years. I have a reasonably complete picture." "She'll have a version of things. Everyone has a version of things," she said. "I'm not going in there to decide who's right. I'm going in there to find out what she needs." He was quiet for a moment. "You make it sound simple." "It's not simple," she said, "but it's straightforward. There's a difference." The elevator opened on the 7th floor. Room 714 was at the end of the corridor. The hallway had the low-grade hum of ventilation and the faint smell of carpet cleaner and the anonymous sameness of every hotel corridor in every city. Their footsteps were quiet on the carpet. Lucian stopped in front of the door. He raised his hand to knock, and then didn't, and then did. 3 seconds of silence. Then the door opened. Carla Moretti was 53 years old and looked like what Lucian would look like if Lucian had spent 8 years actively trying to look like nothing. She had the same bone structure, the same dark eyes, but where Lucian carried his physical presence like a declaration, Carla had spent years compressing herself down into someone unremarkable. Medium height, dark hair going gray at the temples without apology. She was wearing a plain sweater and jeans and no jewelry except a watch. And she looked at Lucian for a long moment with an expression that contained approximately 17 things at once and showed none of them. Then she looked at Serena. "I didn't expect her," Carla said. "No," Lucian said. "Can we come in?" A pause. Then Carla stepped back from the door. The room was neat, not compulsively. She hadn't arranged it for visitors, but her belongings were organized with the efficiency of a person who had been moving through the world with only what they could carry for a long time. A laptop on the desk, closed. A small suitcase by the window, packed. A coffee cup on the nightstand with the hotel's logo on it. Serena clocked all of it in the time it took to cross from the door to the pair of chairs near the window. She sat in one. Carla sat on the edge of the bed. Lucian remained standing, which Serena noted because it meant he was ready to move and wasn't quite able to commit to settling into the room yet. "How much do you know?" Carla asked. She directed it at Lucian. "Enough," he said. "That's not an answer." "We know about Elena," Serena said. Both of them looked at her. "We know about the duplicate authorization set. We know about the remote logins from Lucian's private office network." She kept her voice very even. "We know the sealed filing was submitted 4 days ago. We know Cross has a viable case because you built the part that Dante couldn't." Carla looked at her for a long moment. "You're smarter than I expected," she said. "It wasn't a compliment exactly. It was an assessment." "Everyone underestimates me," Serena said. "It's been professionally useful." Carla almost smiled. The almost smile disappeared quickly. "The filing is already submitted," Carla said, turning back to Lucian. "You can't pull it back. Whatever you do to me tonight, I'm not here to do anything to you," Lucian said. His voice was tight. "I'm here because you're my sister, and you are apparently trying to destroy my life. And I want to know why we're here instead of having had this conversation 7 years ago." 8, Carla said. 8 years ago. And we did have the conversation. You said no. I said the organization didn't work that way. You said... She stopped, pressed her lips together. "You said that if I walked away, I would spend the rest of my life as a liability, and that you couldn't protect a liability. You sat at that desk in that study, and you told me that leaving the family meant being a permanent threat to the family, and that you were not able to allow that." She looked at him with the flat directness of someone who has rehearsed this moment for years and finds it landing differently than they imagined. "You told me, Lucian, in those words, that you couldn't allow it." The room was very quiet. Serena looked at Lucian. His face had closed down in a particular way. Not the controlled blankness he used in negotiations, but something older and less managed. "I meant that I would protect you," he said. "You meant that you would keep me," Carla said. "There's a difference. Protection is something you choose. What you were describing was a cage with better furniture. That's not... I spent 3 years after that conversation waiting for you to change your mind," she said, "thinking that eventually you'd see that I wasn't a threat, that I just wanted a life that didn't involve this." She gestured, Not at the room, but at something larger and invisible. And then I stopped waiting, and I started planning. Lucian put his hand on the back of the chair Serena was sitting in. Not for support. She could feel the pressure of his grip through the chair frame, and it was the grip of a man holding on to something because letting go felt dangerous. You could have come to me again, he said. You said no. That was 8 years ago. People who say that kind of no don't change it, Carla said. Not in my experience of you. Serena said, carefully, what would you need, Carla? If you could design an outcome, not what you've built with Cross, but what you actually want, what would it look like? Carla looked at her. Why are you asking me that? Because you've spent 6 months building a federal case, and if it goes the way you've planned, you get your freedom, but you also get 8 years of looking over your shoulder. You get free of one cage and into another. Serena kept her voice quiet and without judgment. Cross will own you the same way you felt Lucian owned you. He'll hold what you did for him over you for the rest of your life. You know that. Carla said nothing, but she'd gone very still. You don't actually want to testify, Serena said. You want leverage. You built the case so that you'd have something to negotiate with, because last time you came to the table with nothing and got nothing. She paused. So tell me what you actually want. The silence stretched long enough that Serena started to think she'd miscalculated, that Carla was further down the road with Cross than she'd estimated, that the case wasn't leverage but genuine intent, that there was no version of this that didn't end in a federal courtroom. Then Carla said, I want a clean exit, full and documented release of any claims the organization has on me. My inheritance from our father, which Lucian has been managing for 18 years. And a legal agreement that makes it impossible for anyone associated with this family to use me as a target, a liability, or a bargaining chip, ever. She said it like she had said it many times in her own head. Precisely, without hesitation. That's it? Lucian said. That's everything, she said. Lucian looked at her for a long moment. Something moved across his face, something complicated that Serena couldn't fully read from the side, but that she thought might be the expression of a man realizing that the catastrophic war he had been fighting for the past several hours had a diplomatic solution that had been available 8 years ago. I can do that, he said. Carla stared at him. I should have done it then, he said. His voice was rough, not emotional. It wasn't that kind of roughness. It was the roughness of a man forcing himself to say a true thing that went against years of muscle memory. I told myself it was about security, about protecting the organization, about what happened when people who knew our business walked out the door. He paused. But it was also about the fact that you leaving felt like... He stopped. Like what? Carla said. Her voice had changed. Something in it had thinned. Like you were saying the life I'd built wasn't worth staying for, he said. The room absorbed that. Carla looked at her brother across the small hotel room with 8 years of distance between them and said, very quietly, It wasn't for me. That doesn't mean it wasn't for you. Something in Lucian's shoulders went down fractionally. It wasn't visible unless you'd been watching him for years. Serena had been watching him for years. The filing, Serena said, pulling the conversation back before it could become something else entirely. Can you stop it? Carla looked at her. I can tell Cross I'm withdrawing my cooperation. Without my testimony, the document set is incomplete. Elena's authorizations are real, but without a witness to contextualize them inside the organization's operations, they're ambiguous. A good defense attorney, she glanced at Lucian, a very good defense attorney could argue they were test transactions, standard duplicate record procedures. Without me explaining what they actually mean, it doesn't hold. Cross won't let you walk away, Lucian said. He's built 18 months of investigation on the promise that I would testify, Carla said. I was his case. Elena gave him documents. Dante gave him internal formatting, but I gave him context, organizational knowledge. I was the witness who made it a story instead of a stack of paper. She paused. If I withdraw, he has a stack of paper. Lucian was quiet for a moment. Then he said, He'll come after you. I know. Which means you'd need protection, she said. The word sat between them with all its history. Yes, I know how that sounds. Lucien exhaled. It wasn't quite a laugh. It was the sound of a man recognizing the specific, exhausting irony of a situation. Victor Chen is in my car downstairs, he said. He can draft a preliminary agreement tonight. Legal, documented, binding. He held his sister's gaze. And you will have protection. Real protection. Not a cage. Carla looked at him for a long time. Then her phone buzzed on the nightstand. She looked at the screen. Her expression changed. Fast. Too fast. The way faces change when something has gone wrong before the brain has finished processing it. It's Cross, she said. Don't answer it, Lucien said. If I don't answer, he'll know something is wrong. He already knows something is wrong, Serena said. Dante ran 8 hours ago. Cross has been waiting for Carla to check in. The fact that she hasn't... The phone stopped buzzing, went to voicemail. 3 seconds later, it buzzed again. He's escalating, Marco's voice came through Lucien's earpiece. Serena could hear it faintly from where she was sitting. We've got a car that just pulled up outside. 2 men. They're not going in the front. They went around the side of the building. Lucien looked at Carla. Does Cross have people watching this hotel? Carla's face had gone pale. He said it was protection. He said after I made my statement, he'd have people watching my location to make sure. He wasn't protecting you, Lucien said. He was making sure you couldn't change your mind. Serena was already on her feet. The phone buzzed a third time and then stopped entirely. And in the silence that followed, from somewhere down the corridor outside the room, she heard the elevator open. Lucien heard it too. He moved to the door in 3 strides, pressed his back against the wall beside it, and held up 2 fingers at Serena, meaning stay back. And she moved Carla toward the bathroom door because it was the only interior wall in the room, and interior walls stopped more than exterior ones. And she knew this because in 7 years working beside Lucien Moretti, she had learned things she had never asked to learn. Carla grabbed her arm. The laptop, she said urgently. The original authorization logs, the real ones, the ones that show what Elena actually did versus what Cross has, they're on that laptop. If anything happens to it, nothing is happening to it, Serena said. She crossed the room in 4 steps, grabbed the laptop off the desk, and had it under her arm when the knock came at the door. Not a hotel knock. Too sharp. Too deliberate. Lucien looked at her across the room. She looked back at him. 7 years of working beside someone teaches you to communicate without words. It teaches you the difference between the look that means wait and the look that means now and the look that means, I don't know what comes next, but we're in it together regardless. This was the last one. The knock came again, harder this time, and from the other side of the door a voice said, Miss Moretti, Detective Cross would like to speak with you. Lucien's hand was on the door handle. Serena held the laptop against her chest and stood in the middle of the room with Carla behind her and felt the specific, clarifying weight of a moment in which every decision made in the past 7 years had led to this one room, this one door, this one choice that was about to be made for all of them by a man who was still learning that power and control were not the same thing. The handle moved. The door handle turned all the way down and then stopped. Because Lucien Moretti had his hand flat against the door, and the man on the other side pushing it open met resistance he hadn't expected, and that half-second of unexpected resistance was enough. Lucien pulled the door open himself. Fully, fast, the move of a man who had learned long ago that the worst thing you could do when a threat came to your door was let it choose the terms of entry. The man in the corridor stumbled forward slightly, off balance, and in the fraction of a second that it took him to recover, Lucien had already assessed him. 40s, suit that wasn't quite right across the shoulders, right hand moving toward his jacket. Don't, Lucien said. One word. The kind of one word that had a long history behind it. The man stopped. Behind him, a second man was visible in the corridor. Younger, standing back near the elevator with the specific posture of someone providing backup who had not expected to actually need to provide it tonight. Detective Cross sent you, Lucien said. Not a question. The first man had recovered his balance and was working on recovering his composure. Mr. Moretti, we're here for Miss Moretti. She's expected... She's not going anywhere tonight, Lucien said. That's not... I know it's not what you were told. Lucian's voice was very even. Call Cross. Tell him Carla Moretti is in a meeting and will be in contact by morning. And tell him that the 2 men he sent around the side of my building have been located and are having a conversation with my security team. A silence. Tell him, Lucian said, that if he has a problem with that, he should call his lawyer. And tell the lawyer to call Victor Chen. The first man's jaw tightened. He was doing the math that people did when they'd been sent somewhere by someone powerful and arrived to find someone more powerful already in the room. It was an unpleasant calculation, and it showed on his face. He took out his phone, made a call, said 3 words into it. It's compromised here. And listened. His expression didn't change, but something in his posture did, a subtle downward shift, the physical language of a man being told to stand down. He ended the call, looked at Lucian. By morning, he said. By morning, Lucian confirmed. The 2 men left. The elevator opened and closed. The corridor went back to its anonymous hum. Lucian stood in the doorway for a moment, watching the empty hallway. Then he turned back into the room and closed the door behind him, and the click of the latch was the loudest sound any of them had made in the last 3 minutes. Carla was still near the bathroom door. She had her arms crossed. Not defensively, but the way people crossed their arms when they were trying to hold their own temperature steady. She looked at her brother and said nothing for a moment. He'll come back, she said. I know. Not with 2 men, with something official. He has a sealed filing, Lucian. He doesn't need to send muscle. He just needs a judge to unseal it. And without your testimony, the filing doesn't have what it needs, Serena said. She was still holding the laptop. She set it on the desk and turned to face them both. But Cross won't wait. He'll know by morning that you've been in contact with Lucian. He'll accelerate the timeline. How fast? Carla asked. Fast enough that we can't do this through normal legal channels, Chen said from his phone. Lucian had him on speaker now, a small rectangle of voice on the nightstand. If he moves to unseal tomorrow, we need something in place tonight. What can you do tonight? Lucian asked. I can draft an affidavit, Chen said. Carla's sworn statement that the evidence provided to Detective Cross was fabricated through unauthorized access to the Moretti organization's financial system. I'll attach the access log showing Elena Vasquez's after-hours activity and the remote login records from the private office network. It won't stop the filing from being unsealed, but it creates immediate reasonable doubt and triggers an obligation for the federal prosecutor to investigate the evidence chain before proceeding. That takes the gun out of Cross's hands, Serena said. Temporarily, Chen said. It buys us time. Time to locate Elena Vasquez, time to bring Dante in voluntarily with counsel, and time to formally document the agreement between Lucian and Carla in a way that removes Carla's motive for cooperation. If she has no motive, she's not a credible witness, Serena said. Precisely. Carla had been listening to this with the careful attention of someone following a conversation in a language they speak but don't think in. She looked at Lucian. You'd have to move against Elena and Dante tonight. Yes. Elena didn't do this for money, Carla said. Something shifted in her voice. I want you to know that. She did it because I asked her. She paused. She's been a friend for a long time. Before I came to you 6 months ago with what I was planning, I talked to her. She said she'd help. Lucian looked at his sister. You recruited her. Yes. And Dante? Dante approached me, Carla said. I didn't go to him. He'd been looking for a way out of Marco's shadow for years. He found out I was building something, and he offered himself. She held Lucian's gaze. I want you to know the difference between who I went to and who came to me, because of Marco. The room went quiet in a specific way at the mention of Marco's name. Where is Elena now? Lucian asked. I don't know, Carla said. After the filing was submitted, we agreed to separate, to avoid the appearance of coordination. Chen, Lucian said to the phone. Already on it, Chen said. I have her home address and her emergency contact. Give me 20 minutes. Lucian picked up the phone, took it off speaker, and walked to the window, his back to the room again. The window posture, the thinking posture. Serena watched him for a moment and then turned to Carla. They were alone together for the first time. The particular aloneness of two women in a room while the men made phone calls and arrangements, which was, Serena thought, a condition she had spent too many years accepting without examining. "You've been with him 7 years," Carla said. "Yes." "Why?" Serena considered the question seriously. "Because the work mattered," she said, "and because—" She stopped. "Because I believed he was more than what he showed most people. I wanted to see if I was right." "And were you?" "Sometimes," she said. "He's not a simple man to be right about." Carla almost smiled again. This time it lasted a fraction longer before going away. "He's not simple at all," she said. "That's always been the problem. If he were simply terrible, it would be easier. But he's capable of being extraordinary. He just spends most of his energy being afraid of what that costs." Serena looked at her. "What made you decide to do it this way, instead of coming back to him directly?" "Because I tried the direct way," Carla said. 8 years ago, and it cost me—" She pressed her lips together. "I lost 8 years. I lived small. I disappeared into a city where nobody knew my last name, and I did ordinary work and had ordinary days, and it was fine. But it wasn't free, because I knew that any moment, if Lucian decided the situation had changed, I could be brought back in." She looked at Serena steadily. "That's not a life. That's a parole." Serena said nothing, because she understood that more than she wanted to. "So I built a weapon," Carla said, "big enough that he couldn't ignore it, and couldn't just absorb it. I needed something that forced a real negotiation, not Lucian telling me what was going to happen, but an actual exchange." She looked toward the window where Lucian was still talking quietly into his phone. "I didn't want to destroy him. I want you to believe that." "I do," Serena said, "but Elena believed something different." Carla went quiet. "Elena isn't going to see this the way you see it," Serena said carefully. "She helped you because she cares about you. But she also took significant personal risk, and if this resolves without going to court, she's exposed in a way that doesn't resolve cleanly." "I know," Carla said, and the weight of that word was genuine. "She'll need protection too," Serena said. "Real protection, documented, the same as what Lucian is offering you." Carla looked at her. "You'd advocate for that." "Someone should," Serena said. Lucian came back from the window. He looked at Serena first, a brief, assessing look that she had learned to read as his way of checking the temperature of a room before he re-entered it. "Chen found Elena," he said. "She's at her apartment. Marco is—" He paused. "Marco wants to handle it." Carla tensed visibly. "Not like that," Lucian said quickly. "He wants to talk to her. He knows she's—" He looked at Carla. "He knows she's your person. He wants to explain the situation before anyone else does." "Marco talking to Elena alone is—" Carla started. "Is what needs to happen," Lucian said. "Because he's the only one who can tell her that Dante is going to be all right and have her believe it." The room absorbed that. "Dante," Carla said. "He ran because he panicked," Lucian said. "He's 26 years old, and he made a bad decision, and then a worse one, and then he ran. I'm not—" His jaw worked for a moment. "I'm not going to make it worse than it already is. Marco knows where he is. He's going to bring him in tonight. We'll have Chen present." Carla stared at her brother. "What?" he said. "Nothing," she said, but her voice had done something, cracked slightly in the way voices cracked when they had been braced for a blow that didn't come. "I just—" She stopped. "I expected something different." "I know what you expected," Lucian said. "I know what I would have done 3 years ago." He held her gaze without blinking. "I'm trying to be different. I don't know how well I'm doing at it, but I'm trying." Carla looked at him for a long time with those dark eyes that were so similar to his and so different in what they'd seen. "The affidavit," she said finally. "Tell Chen to include Elena and Dante. If I'm withdrawing cooperation, I want them covered. Whatever deal protects me needs to cover them." Something shifted in Lucian's face. Relief, maybe. Or the specific expression of a man who had just learned something about his sister that he had spent 8 years not knowing. "All right," he said. "And my inheritance." "All right." And the legal release, full and documented. Chen will draft it tonight, he said. You'll have it before morning. Carla nodded once. Then she sat down on the edge of the bed with the sudden heaviness of a person who has been holding a very large thing for a very long time and has just been given permission to put it down. None of them said anything for a moment. The ventilation hummed. Somewhere below them the city continued its indifferent noise. Serena sat in the chair she had been in before. She was very tired. Not physically, it was a deeper tired, the kind that settled into the center of the chest and made the air feel heavier. She thought about the photograph of her mother in the blue cardigan, still in her bag, still unresolved. The photograph, she said. The one of my mother. Who took it? Lucian looked at her. He had the expression of a man who had been hoping this particular question would wait until morning. One of Cross's people, he said. We identified the photographer from the cafe security footage about an hour ago. He's a private contractor Cross uses for surveillance. He's been sitting on it for... He paused. He was going to use it as leverage if Carla got cold feet, a reminder that there were other ways to create pressure. He was going to threaten my mother, Serena said. Yes. She sat with that, the coldness of it, the calculation involved in looking at a woman's life and identifying her mother as the most effective lever. Is he in custody? She asked. He will be by morning, Lucian said. Chen is filing a complaint tonight. Witness tampering and criminal intimidation. Serena nodded. She looked at her hands for a moment. I want to call my mother, she said. Of course, Lucian said. She got up and went to the window. The same window Lucian had been standing at, looking down at the street below, the city lit up in its ordinary nighttime way, entirely unaware of everything that had been held together and almost come apart in this hotel room tonight. She called her mother. 4 rings, and then a groggy voice. It was late. She'd been asleep. It's me, Serena said. I know it's late. I just wanted to hear your voice. Serena. Her mother's voice shifted from sleepy to alert, in the specific way mothers shifted when something felt off. Are you all right? I'm fine, she said. I'll come see you this weekend. Is that all right? Of course it's all right. You don't have to ask. I know, she said. I'll see you Saturday. She hung up and stood at the window for another moment, looking at the city. Behind her, she could hear Lucian and Carla talking, low voices, the hesitant rhythm of 2 people relearning how to speak to each other after a long silence. Not easy, not smooth. There were gaps and restarts, and at one point Carla said something sharp, and Lucian absorbed it without deflecting, which was new and clearly cost him. But they kept talking. The next several hours moved the way crisis hours moved, fast in the moments that required action, agonizingly slow in the spaces between. Chen arrived at the hotel at midnight with a legal pad and a printer he'd borrowed from the hotel business center and the particular focused energy of a man who did his best work when everything was on fire. He drafted the affidavit with Carla, going through every detail carefully, correcting him twice, adding specificity where he softened the language. Marco called at 12:40. His voice was stripped down, rougher than usual, with the particular texture of a man who had just had a conversation that had cost him something significant. Elena had agreed to provide a counterstatement. She wasn't happy. She was, by Marco's description, furious and frightened in equal measure. But she agreed. Dante was harder. Dante didn't come in willingly. Dante, it turned out, was in a motel 20 minutes from the city, which meant he hadn't run as far as he could have, which Serena thought meant some part of him had been waiting to be found. But being found and coming in were different things, and there was an hour in the middle of the night where Marco was on the phone with his brother, and the conversation was audible through the walls as a series of raised voices and long silences, and at the end of it, Dante came. He was 26 years old, and he looked younger in person than he had in the personnel files. He sat in the hotel room with his hands on his knees and didn't look at Lucian and didn't look at Marco and stared at the carpet with the expression of a man trying to make himself smaller than he was. Lucian sat across from him. The setup should have been intimidating. Lucian Moretti at close range, with everything Dante had done laid out between them. But Lucian sat back in the chair and said, "Tell me what you wanted." Dante looked up. He hadn't expected that. "Not what you did," Lucian said. "What you wanted." A long pause. To not be Marco's little brother anymore, he said. His voice was rough. To do something that was mine. To not spend my whole life standing behind someone else's reputation. Marco, standing against the wall, looked at the ceiling for a moment. All right, Lucian said. All right, Dante said. There are ways to be useful that don't involve burning the organization down, Lucian said. If you want something different, we can talk about that. After you've given Chen everything you gave Cross. Every communication, every document, every interaction. He held the younger man's gaze. And after you've talked to your brother. Dante looked at Marco. Marco looked back at him with an expression that was tired and hurt, and not done being either of those things. Yeah, Dante said quietly. Okay. It was nearly 3 in the morning when Chen filed the counter-affidavit through an emergency submission to the Federal Circuit. He called his contact and made sure it was received. He called Cross's office and left a message, professionally worded, the kind of professional that was also a warning, detailing the counter-evidence that had been submitted and the witnesses that had withdrawn cooperation. Cross didn't call back that night. In the morning, his supervisor did. Chen handled it. Serena was in the hotel lobby when the call came through. She had been sitting in one of the anonymous lobby chairs with a coffee she'd gotten from the machine in the corridor, watching the early morning staff begin their shift with the resigned efficiency of people who had been up for many hours or not yet started. The lobby had a different quality at 4 in the morning. Thinner, quieter, the pretense of the place stripped back to its bones. Lucien found her there. He sat down in the chair beside her without asking, which was the most natural thing he had done all night. He didn't have coffee. He looked like a man who had passed through the kind of tired that wanted to sleep and come out the other side into the kind that simply wanted to stop moving. They sat in silence for a moment. Cross's supervisor called Chen, he said. I heard. The investigation is being reviewed. They can't proceed with a case where the primary witness has retracted and the evidence chain has been contested. He leaned back in the chair. It's not over. There will be hearings, document reviews. It'll take months. But he doesn't have what he needs to move forward, Serena said. Not anymore. She drank her coffee. It was bad. Machine coffee at 4 in the morning was always bad. But the heat was useful. Elena is going to be difficult, she said. I know. She did this for Carla. She's going to feel like Carla chose you over her. I know, he said again. Someone needs to make sure she understands what she's been promised, not just the legal protection, the actual human acknowledgement that she took a significant risk and it cost her. Lucian looked at her. Would you talk to her? Yes, Serena said, but not as your representative, as myself. What's the difference? The difference is that I'll tell her the truth about what happened, including the parts that reflect badly on everyone involved, including you. She looked at him. Can you handle that? He was quiet for a moment. Yes, he said. She nodded. They sat in silence again. The lobby door opened and a couple came in with luggage, speaking quietly between themselves, trailing the energy of people arriving somewhere after a long journey. What you said last night, Lucian said, about what the last 7 years have actually been. I said we'd have that conversation, she said. I meant it. I'd like to have it now. She looked at him. He looked back. At 4 in the morning in a hotel lobby, with coffee from a machine and the remnants of a crisis that had lasted approximately 11 hours, Lucian Moretti looked less like the most feared man in the city and more like a person. Tired. Honest in the way people became honest when they'd run out of energy for anything else. The last 7 years, she said, I have been the best employee you have ever had. I have been thorough and loyal, and I have protected your interests in ways you don't fully know about and probably won't ever know about. I have been genuinely good at this work. Yes, he said. And I have also, she said, spent 7 years making myself indispensable in a way that made it impossible for me to leave. I told myself it was because the work mattered. And it did. But it was also because being needed by you felt like something else. And I let myself confuse the two. He didn't say anything. He was listening in the way he listened when he was actually listening, not preparing a response, just receiving. I'm not angry about that, she said. I made my own choices. But I'm done pretending that what this is has been purely professional. I think you are too. I'm done pretending a lot of things, he said. Tonight helped with that. She looked at her coffee. What Carla said about you being afraid of what it costs to be extraordinary. She paused. She's not wrong. I know. You built walls around everything that mattered because you believed that was protection. But walls protect things by keeping them still, and things that stay still for too long. Stop working, he said. Stop being alive, she said. A pause. I don't want a secretary anymore, he said. I want to be clear about that. Whatever you decide about staying or going, I'm not asking you to go back to that desk and organize my meetings. I'm asking something different, and I know I haven't earned the right to ask it yet. What are you asking? He turned in the chair to face her more directly. It was a small physical adjustment, but it was deliberate, and she noted it the way she noted everything deliberate he did. I'm asking for the chance to show you that the person you believed I could be, the one you stayed for 7 years hoping to see more of, is actually who I want to become. Not for the organization, not for the business. He held her gaze. For reasons that have nothing to do with what you can do for me. She looked at him for a long moment. The lobby hummed. Somewhere a phone rang at the front desk and was answered. That's a reasonable thing to ask for, she said. Is that a yes? It's I'm not leaving tonight, she said, which is different from where I was 12 hours ago. You'll have to work with that. Something in his face shifted. Not quite a smile, but the particular softening that happened when a man who had been braced for impact found that the impact was gentler than expected. I can work with that, he said. She finished her coffee and set the cup down on the table between them. I'm going to go check on Carla, she said, and then I'm going to sleep for approximately 4 hours. And then we're going to start dealing with the aftermath of all of this in a way that is legal and documented and doesn't require anyone to test anyone else with photographs of their mothers. Agreed, he said. She stood up. She had taken 2 steps toward the elevator when she stopped and turned back around. Lucian? He looked at her. The secretary badge, she said. The old one. From my first year. She paused. Don't ever put it on my desk again. He looked at her with something that was finally, completely, a smile. Brief and real and unguarded, in a way she had seen perhaps twice in 7 years. Understood, he said. She turned and walked to the elevator. In the months that followed, the Moretti organization underwent a restructuring that Victor Chen described in legal filings as voluntary compliance review, and that Marco described more accurately as tearing the whole thing apart and putting it back the right way. It was slow. It was expensive. It was, at several points, genuinely uncertain. Cross's investigation was formally suspended pending review of the evidence chain. Elena Vasquez accepted a settlement and a formal acknowledgement that was not quite an apology but was, Serena felt, the closest thing to one that the situation could produce. She did not return to the organization, which was her right, and Carla visited her twice in the months after, which was not anyone's business but their own. Dante went back to school. Marco paid for it and didn't tell him he was paying for it, which was the most Marco thing Marco had ever done, and which Serena thought said something important about the ways people who couldn't say things found other ways to say them. Carla got her documented exit, got her inheritance, got her ordinary life back, but this time without the weight of surveillance and waiting. She called Lucian on his birthday, which he mentioned to Serena in a very offhand way that did not fool her for a second, and Serena went back to the mansion. Not to her old office, not to the secretary desk or the morning schedules or the filing system she had built over 7 years. She worked with Chen on the legal restructuring, brought in outside counsel where it was needed, and spent 4 months doing something that was not a clean job title, but that mattered in every way that mattered. The work was harder, messier. Without the clarity of defined roles, there were days when she and Lucian disagreed badly enough that one of them left the room. And days when the thing they were building together felt too new and too fragile to trust. He still had the reflex to control. She still had the reflex to protect everyone from the consequences of her own feelings. These were not problems that resolved in 4 months. They were not problems that resolved completely, period. But one evening in late autumn, Serena was in the office that had replaced her secretary desk, a proper office, with her name on the door, with work she had fought to have authority over. and Lucian came in without knocking, which he still did, some things being slower to change than others. He put a set of documents on her desk. "The last of the restructuring filings," he said. "Chen needs your signature too." She looked at the documents. Her name was listed for the first time alongside Lucian's as a co-director of the legitimate holdings. She picked up a pen. "You could have just sent these over," she said. "I know," he said. She signed, passed them back. He didn't immediately leave. He stood at the desk and looked at her the way he sometimes looked at her now, without the management of it, without the calculation, just directly and honestly like a man who had spent most of his life looking at everything sideways and was still getting used to the alternative. "How are you?" he asked. He asked it like he meant the question and wanted the real answer, which was something he had gotten better at and still sometimes got wrong. "I'm good," she said, and meant it. Not perfectly, not the uncomplicated good of a life without complications, but the real kind. The kind that had been earned through a night in a hotel room and 4 hard months in every small moment before and after. The kind that felt like solid ground under her feet. She looked at him. He was still not a simple man. He would not become one. There were still rooms in him she hadn't seen, still reflexes she'd have to navigate around, still the long shadow of everything he'd been before he started trying to be something different. That was the truth of it. And she had decided she could live in the truth of it because she was also not simple, and she had her own rooms and her own shadows, and the thing they were building between them was not a fairy tale, but something better, something that could hold weight. She picked up the next file and went back to work. He went back to his office, and the city went on outside the windows, indifferent and alive, the way cities always did, full of people carrying their secrets and their histories and their small daily choices toward whatever came next. The door between their offices stayed open. It had been her idea 3 months ago. He had agreed immediately, without being asked twice. That, she thought, was progress enough for now.